Good evening, everyone, to the June 11th Planning and Zoning meeting. If we could have roll call, Shannon, please.
Messina,
Here?
Fleming,
Here.
Ingalls,
Here.
Lutrip,
Here.
Mandel, Rumpler, Ward.
Here.
And if we can stand for the pledge, please, and join us. I pledge
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We have approval of minutes for the May 14th meeting.
Make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
At this time, public comments, and can you hear me back? Okay, great. Public comments is anything other than what we have on the agenda tonight. If anyone wants to speak on any other item, if not, we'll move ahead to commissioner comments, if we have any. Nothing, Peter?
Not till just before adjournment.
Okay, and staff comments, please.
All
Hillary.
right. Good evening, Commissioners. I have a handful of updates for you. So the first is the July meeting. So we have 2 items, actually technically 3 items, on the July agenda. So we have the amendments to the accessory dwelling unit code. And that was what we had discussed at the workshop with you a few weeks ago. We've been working with our working group on creating some amendments. So that's the first item. And then we have the River's Edge request, and this is the larger parcels owned by Lance Douglas. So he's bringing forward a project proposal that's consistent with the annexation agreement. So there will be a PUD and a subdivision request that evening. So that's the first thing. We are working on a grant application to bring Opticos here. We've talked about this before with the missing middle, which is looking at housing types in between single-family detached and the mid-rise apartments. And so they would come and lead a forum and do a day tour with us and get a lot of background on what are the existing housing conditions and give us some recommendations on how to do infill in a sensitive manner, recognizing our established neighborhoods. We also, if you were tracking the council's decision on the East Sherman on the land exchange with St. Vincent's, they did decide to exchange properties for the city-owned properties on Homestead for the 2 properties owned by St. Vincent's. So that'll help us with our efforts to revitalize East Sherman. And we are going to be working with community builders to finish the master plan. And we'll get that done within, hopefully, the next month, bring that to you, and then go to council. So we're making some headway finally. And then on our comprehensive plan update, which is called Envision Coeur d'Alene, going to city council next Tuesday for approval of the contract with MIG and their subconsultants. So we are excited about that, and I've seen some comments and heard some comments on Facebook that, what's going on, why isn't there public engagement yet? Well, we slowed it down because we need the consultant team on board before we start in the community engagement, because we might be going in a different direction than we need to. So we'll keep the community updated. We will have lots of opportunities for involvement and for participation on some of our focus groups and other things like that. We're also working on creating an online sign-in form for community members so that you don't have to read all the handwriting and everybody doesn't have to scramble to sign in at the table. So
Thank you.
we're going to be demoing that shortly. Jake Geringer has been helping us with our IT team on creating that. So that's kind of an exciting opportunity. And even though people will sign in and put their contact information, it won't show up on the screen. It'll just be the name and if they want to comment or not. So it'll be a streamlined version for us. And then lastly, and I'll open a slide here, if I can get this to do full screen, we have this Thursday the Health Corridor Visioning Workshop. And the public is being invited, and commissioners and others, to come and provide some input on the Health Corridor. This is for the master plan and economic feasibility study that's being done by HDR and paid for by Ignite CDA. So this is this Thursday from 5:30 to 8:30 at the Midtown Center. And there will be, while we would want everybody to stay the whole time if they could, there will be an option for kind of more of the open house concept. If people can't stay the full time, they could still get some information and fill out some forms. So that's all I have.
That's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
good. And I love the online sign-in. Stuff for me getting embarrassed all the time. I don't know how to pronounce names, but, okay, great. At this time, we're going to go into our public hearings, and there are sign-up sheets for each one, so if you want to speak on any one of the particular items tonight, just make sure you signed up. They'll be given to me, and I apologize up front if I pronounce your names wrong when I do that. And the way it'll work is staff will come up and give us a synopsis of the hearing, and then the applicant will come up and have some time to explain the project and what they'd like to do, and then public testimony on that particular one. You'll have about 5 minutes to come up and comment on anything the applicant has presented to us, and then the applicant has about another 10 minutes or so afterwards to come back and address any issues that might have been brought up by the public comment. And then I'll close public hearing, and we'll come up here and discuss it and hopefully have a vote on it. So that's how it'll go. And I know some people get a little nervous and don't like to speak, but please come on up. We're friendly, and it's okay, even though you're on TV. The first issue is SP 4-19, a proposed wireless communication special use permit in a C17 zoning district. The applicant is TDS Metrocom LLC. Sean, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Just a moment to get this started. Okay. As mentioned, tonight before us is a special use permit request for a wireless communication facility on a parcel that is zoned C17. It is 1/2 of an acre, just a hair under. And the request is for a 25-foot tall, quote unquote, tower. It's not very tall. Most of the towers that we tend to see are pushing 150 feet approximately. So the applicant is requesting a special use permit for a wireless facility in the city of Coeur d'Alene. The applicant seeks to install an antenna to capture local over-the-air television channels to be able to provide them to their future customers via a fiber optic network that will be installed at their behest. So inside of your staff report, there is a description of what C17 is and what is allowed in a C17. You can see on page 2 of your staff report that a wireless communication facility does require a special use permit. Here is a picture of vicinity map showing where the location is along Sunup Avenue. So there are some findings that need to be made for this request. And the first finding is that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The subject is contiguous and it is also, it actually is in the city limits, and it falls within the US 95 corridor under transition. Here is a map of that area. This little tiny white dot right here is the subject property. It's transition, and these neighborhoods are where the character is in transition and should be developed with care. The description of what the corridor is today is also provided, as well as what the corridor tomorrow will be. It's also important to note in your staff report, there are some bullet points that describe some of the aspects of the US 95 corridor, although none of them directly apply to this request. And I would have had to use like size 13 font to get them on there, and no one would have been able to read them anyway. So, all right, so there are objectives and goals that are associated with the comprehensive plan. I've listed them out here. They are defined inside of your staff report on page 4. So finding B8B is the design and planning of the site is not compatible, is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. So there are, that applies to the description that I just gave to you for the 2007 comprehensive plan. There are some photos and some things following as well. Here is the proposed elevation For the building itself, as you can see, the overall height is 25 feet. On top of that will sit an antenna that looks like this, kind of like the old 1950s antennas that we used to have on top of our houses. It's very similar, is what it reminded me of. And then the site plan showing the site as a whole. You can see access would come off of Sun up here. There is a gate. There is landscaping associated with it to screen it from the view from the right-of-way. This is the building right here, and then the antenna would be at the edge of the building, attached to the building. So here's the zoning of the area. As you can see on this side of 95, on the east side, it is all commercial. Then there's also a map here showing the prior special use permits in the area. And as you can see, just a little northeast of the request, in 2000, there was a wireless communication facilities request, custom manufacturing, retail sales, and bulk fuel sales. So here are some pictures of the site. We're looking west here. You can see where the edge of the sidewalk terminates. There is a pin right here showing where the edge of the property is, where that corner is. And this is a direct view into the site looking north. And then from the other side, looking east, you can see where the sidewalk ends as well. So the next finding is B8C, is that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. You can tell through the photos that streets do exist. Stormwater comment was provided by Chris Bosley, saying that it needs to be contained on the subject property. That will be reviewed at the time of building permit. And the street can also handle the one car, maybe a month, that would see this site. All right. So water had no comments or conditions for the request. Water is available to the site. Wastewater as well, this was provided by Mike Becker, is that public sewer is available to the property. Any extensions that are needed would be borne by the developer. Fire department, this is their boilerplate language saying that they will review it for access and fire protection at the time of permit. And there are no conditions proposed for this special use permit request. It was noticed and posted properly according to our code. And with that, Planning Commission must consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Question, go ahead, Peter.
What is the building height in C-17?
For commercial, there is no maximum height.
And for non-commercial, there's no maximum?
For residential, it's 45 feet.
Okay, so this 25 foot is well under that.
It is, yeah. So a single-family home would be capped at 32. A multifamily dwelling unit would be at 45.
'Cause one of the things was running through my head was, are they analogous with cell towers? They're not at all with the height.
Right, right. In this case, our code says that if they are going to profit or they're going to resend that signal out, that they would need a special use permit.
So that this antenna will capture something and be able to distribute it on some network.
Correct.
And do we know the distance of that network, how far they can go?
That I will leave to the applicant
Well, the
to,
reason I'm asking that is this the start of a new technology where we'll find a lot of these 25-foot antennas throughout the city to increase access?
it's for a fiber optic network, and so that's pretty expensive to install those types of networks. I don't see a whole lot of competition coming, but I could be wrong.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thanks, Sean.
All right, thank you.
And the applicant? Come on up. Just state your name and I'll swear you in.
Yeah, my name is Jared Paul.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, Jared, go ahead.
So I thought Sean represented the project very well. Just to reiterate, this will be distributed over a fiber optic network. So to answer your question, no, there will not be, on our behalf, any additional masts, towers, what have you, erected. This will be our single access point, will serve as our central office for this fiber optic network. So we will harness local channels and redistribute them through this solution.
My question was a little broader than that, was if this technology is such that this turns to be very successful, will there be a lot of duplication of that by either you or other people that would want to do this?
Not for us. I can't speak on behalf of other possible competitors, but we would not have the need to.
Is the industry moving that way,
Is the industry moving?
towards these 25-foot antennas for?
No, this is not a 5G site. This is, as Sean mentioned, a classic analog receiver that we can receive local news stations that broadcast wirelessly and bring that back and redistribute that over our fiber. So this is not a new technology.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
I have Randy Brones, he's in favor, does not wish to testify. And then Todd Naylor, in favor, does not wish to testify. That's all I have on my sign-up sheet. I'm sure there's no rebuttal. So at this time, I'm going to close public testimony and bring it to the commissioners for discussion and a motion.
Any discussion?
And silence.
And silence. I'll make a motion.
Okay.
This matter having come before the Planning Commission on June 11th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of this item SP-4-19A, wireless communication special use permit in the C17 zoning district. The applicant is TDS Motricom LLC. The location is a single parcel measuring plus or minus half an acre, located off of West Sunup Avenue with a legal description of no known address, Sunrise Commercial Parcel, Block 2, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho 83815. Our first findings are all B1 through B7, standard boilerplate, postings, et cetera. On item B8, pursuant to section 17.09.220 special use permit criteria, special use permit may be approved only if the proposal conforms to all the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. B8A, the proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, in particular with capital improvements and city services. And those are the two that I would find most prominent here. B8B, the design and planning of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. It's a pretty benign property. It won't have a lot of traffic. It's going to be there, and that's about all it'll be. It'll do its own thing very silently. B8C, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services, and this is based on fact. We have the streets, the property is empty at this point in time, and it will not, detract from the city itself. And finally, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that TDS Motricom LLC for a special use permit as described in the application should be approved as of this date.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a first?
Second.
Okay, you won, Mike. You got that one.
Thank you.
Second by Ward. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. SP-4-19 passes. Congratulations. The next hearing, and I see a few people that came in, and hopefully they signed up on this, which is a PUD 1-19 and S-1-19. Applicant is Unfolding LLC, a proposed 2.23 acre plan unit development known as the District at Riverstone, and a proposed 24 lot preliminary plat known as the District at Riverstone. And Mike, I'll let you take it.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
This is a public hearing for PUD-1-19, Plan Unit Development for the District at Riverstone, and S-1-19, a 24-lot preliminary plat subdivision. The applicant is the Unfolding LLC, and they are requesting approval of a proposed plan unit development and a 24-lot preliminary plat known as the District at Riverstone. Property is located at 2744 North Riviera Parkway. Legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on May 25th, 2019, and all of the required notifications have been made. There are two decision points in front of you tonight. The first one is the PUD, which is approval of a gated residential plan unit development. And the second one is the 24-lot preliminary plat known as the District at Riverstone. There are separate findings for each one. These are the requested modifications that the applicant is proposing for the PUD. Front setback 10 rather than 20, rear setback 10 rather than 25, side setback 5 rather than the 5 and 10 for lots without alley access, minimum lot area of 1875 square feet rather than 5,500 square feet, minimum lot width of 25 feet rather than 50 feet, private gated vehicle access rather than open access for the public, private streets rather than public streets, right-of-way width 31 feet rather than 55 feet, sidewalk on only one side of the street. Here's the location maps indicating where this property is located. You see it's highlighted here in red. This is Interstate 90, this is Celtice, this is the Spokane River, this is John Loop, and this is Riverstone. The property is located here right next to this public park, Riverstone Park. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of the property highlighted in red. Here's a couple of photos of bird's eye view. This is looking north of the subject site. This is Riverstone Park, John Loop Road, Riviera Walk subdivision. This is a photo looking west of that same property. Here's a historical aerial photo from 2004 indicating what the property looked like back then. At that time, it was a gravel pit operation, and you can see where this property is located within that area. Here's a site plan indicating what the proposed subdivision is going to look like. There's 4 single-family dwelling units located in the subdivision with attached single-family homes on the rest of the properties. Here's their open space plan that they've submitted with 2 open space pocket areas indicating a bench, open space area, and some community gardens, along with public access to the trail system through this gated area. Here's a picture of the gated area from access off of John Loop, indicating they'll be 20 feet back, and there'll also be a walkway gate to get into the sub-PUD. Here's the typical lot layout the applicant is proposing, 5 foot on each side for the single-family dwellings, 10 on the rear, 10 on the front, 20 on the if there's no sidewalk, they're going to go 20 feet back for the garage. If there is a sidewalk, they're going to still be 20 from the garage to the sidewalk, so 25 feet to the property line. And this is the attached housing with the 20-foot driveway and the 5-foot setback on each one. Excuse me. The applicant has submitted some proposed building elevations of what the subdivision is proposed to look like, and I'll go through those slides. This is the first one of single families. Here's the attached. Another single family, and a possible second-story single family with the dividing line of the property right here. There are 7 findings that must be met in order for a plan unit development to be approved. Finding B8A through B8G. We'll go through each of one of those, and starting off with B8A, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan indicates this in the Spokane River District area, and it's in the transition areas located in green, and transition areas are areas where neighborhoods are likely to change over time and within the planning period, along with different land uses. The comprehensive plan indicates that the Spokane River District area tomorrow will be scaled. The scale development will be in urban nature, promoting multimodal connection to downtown, that the overall density may approach 10 to 16 dwelling units per acre, but pockets of higher density housing are appropriate and encouraged, and that open space parks, pedestrian and bicycle connections, and other public spaces will be provided throughout, especially adjacent to the Spokane River. This slide indicates 3 comprehensive plan objectives as it relates to this PUD request. The full list is on page 6 and 7 of your staff report. Support the enhancement of existing urbanized areas, discourage sprawl, promote bicycle and pedestrian connection and access between neighborhoods and open parks and trail systems, and provide for a diversity of suitable housing forms, within existing neighborhoods to match the needs of a changing population. The next finding is finding B8B. The design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. Here are some site photos of the existing site. The site is currently vacant. This is on the north side looking west. This is on the north side looking south towards the river. This is on the east side looking west. And this is on the south side looking north. And then there's one more photo on the northwest corner looking south. Here's the existing zoning map showing the existing zoning of C17, C17 to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west is the C17 PUD of Riverwalk subdivision. The existing land use maps indicate single-family dwellings to the west and to the north, and commercial developments to the east, vacant, and the trail system to the south. The next finding is B8C, that the proposal is or is not compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. The subject property is relatively flat with John Loop Road to the north. The natural features of the site are consistent with the natural features of the surrounding properties, including the residential subdivision to the west and the public park to the east. Next finding is finding B8D, that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such development will or will not adequately be served by the existing public facilities and services. This application has been routed through the city departments. City staff has indicated there are adequate public services and facilities available. However, city staff has concerns that the property may have some structural fill issues. The applicant has submitted a geotech report with the staff report that is attached. However, there are some issues that need, and a new geotech report is being submitted by the applicant, so staff can look at that. So prior to any installation of any ground utilities, including sanitary sewer, a new geotech report must be submitted for the approval of any mitigation for the presence of groundwater and unacceptable fill material. The full staff comments are on page 20, 21, and 22 of the staff report. We also have members of each department here if you have any specific questions relating to any of those items. The next finding is finding B8E. The proposal does or does not provide adequate private common open space area as determined by the commission, no less than 10% of gross land area free of buildings, streets, driveways, and parking areas. The common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreational purposes. The applicant is proposing 10% open space that can be accessed by residents of the proposed development. The applicant has indicated that the open space will be 2 large grass areas for dogs of the community, benches, garden boxes, seasonal vegetables, apple trees, and landscaping areas for the residents to enjoy. Here's the open space map. Once again, we kind of went over this, the 2 open space areas and the connection to the trail system. There'll be a bench and community gardens. The next finding is finding B8F. Off-street parking does or does not provide parking sufficient for users of the development. The applicant is not requesting any waiver of this requirement. Each single-family dwelling unit will be required for 2 off-street paved parking spaces. The next finding is finding B8G, that the proposal does or does not provide for adequate method for the perpetual maintenance of all common property. The applicant is putting together CCNRs and bylaws that will be required to take care of the open space and other infrastructure. The HOA will be responsible for continued maintenance for all street and traffic signage and required signage. That concludes the findings for the PUD. Then we'll go right into the next findings for the subdivision. There are 3 findings for the subdivision approval. First finding is finding B7A, that all of the general preliminary plat requirements have or have not been met as attested by the city engineer. The city engineer has indicated that preliminary plat submittal contains all of the general preliminary plat elements required by the municipal code, and deviations from the required subdivision standards have been requested through the plan unit development process as noted in the PUD portion of the staff report. The next finding is finding B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, right-of-ways, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and utilities are or are not adequate. Again, the staff comments are on page 20 through 22 of your staff report. And staff has recommended 15 recommended conditions for the PUD and subdivision request. And finally, B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does or does not comply with all of the subdivision design standards contained in Chapter 1615 and all of the subdivision improvement standards contained in Chapter 16.40, the requirements. Per the engineering review, the proposal of the preliminary plat, both subdivision and design standards and improvement standards have been vetted for compliance. Because of the proposed streets are private, adherence to the city standards for widths are not required. There are 15 recommended conditions.
You don't have to read
I won't read them all, thank you, and you have them at the end of your staff report. The Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. That concludes my presentation.
Questions? Oh, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mike. Good presentation. Appreciate that. Question, if I could, on the deviations in your staff report. You list them all there. How do these deviations, say, compare with similar projects that we've approved? Little PUD, we've Cottage Grove up on Prairie Avenue, Riviera right next to this, for example. Some of the other similar projects, are these pretty much comparable with that?
These are very much comparable. They're pretty much in line with the ones at Cottage Grove that you mentioned, and then the ones right next to this at Riviera Walk. However, this one will have larger setbacks. The one next door had a 0 setback with a 5-foot maintenance easement. This is required to have 5 from each property line, so there'll be 10 feet between buildings. So this would be a little bit more setbacks on this PUD.
So it kind of compares favorably. If anything, it's a little bit more generous than, where we've tightened things down. That's the first part of the question,
Okay.
is how does it compare? It's kind of in line with the other ones. That said, how are the other ones performing? Do we ever get out in the field and, a year later, 2 years later, we had quite a February with snow and,
Yeah.
and this and that, and setbacks and snow storage. We've talked about some of those kind of issues. Do we ever get out a year or two later and see how these things are performing?
We do hear comments back from some of the people living in these neighborhoods. We've noticed that if there is a 0 lot line and there is snow, that there is issues with that, and the snow will fall on the air conditioning units or gas meters and bury them. And so there was an issue with snow and the closeness of those buildings to each other. So as a staff level, we figured that would be an issue, and we wanted to make sure the setbacks were greater.
Thank you. Other question I have, if I could just if I could ask one more. So on this geo report, I read it multiple times trying to get kind of an executive summary and a punchline, and it reads of some red flags with groundwater and some other issues, some questionable soils. I know enough about soils to see myself there's some real issues there. Staff has raised some concerns, and it looks like kind of a leap of faith if we approve this, and we know that more needs to be done. Is there was there discussion at staff level of say postponing this until we can get more definitiveness on the geo report?
There was a discussion on that item, but it felt like the conditions would handle that as far as they would have to get another geotech report submitted and approved by city staff before any infrastructure is installed.
So if,
Thanks.
so on that, if,
I might not
Go
be the
ahead.
best person talking about the fill part, but we have Mike Becker's here with the wastewater department to answer any questions on that.
well, if this happened to move forward and then a geo report comes back and it's not favorable, does the PUD and these two findings go away, or what happens?
That's my concern.
Right, okay.
Right. And I can address that, Commissioners
Sure.
and Chairman. So how we've drafted that condition is that the departments would have to agree to mitigation to make it work for public infrastructure. So that is something where it's possible that we get to a point when we see the geotech report and the mitigation, hopefully it's not super expensive, but maybe it is very expensive, and at that point, the developer would need to determine, how to move forward. But the conditions as written do protect the city's utilities because we still have the final say. But there is, we don't know everything about the soil, so that's why I think city staff really did have the concern and wanted to make sure we get additional geotech, and the applicant and their team also expressed some concerns with the geotech report, so.
So if a unfavorable geotechnical report comes back, the city's going to say, sorry, you can't build, I would imagine, or can they do something, the applicant can do something and say they can continue, because we, let's say, approve this particular 2 items?
A little bit, but it might be helpful to bring some of the other staff members up that really deal with the geotech. But I think there's always an answer. It's just it might be very expensive if all the soil has to be
Okay.
removed and replaced. For example, that might not be cost effective for the developer. But there are other mitigations that have been proposed. There's bridging. There's all these different things that I don't know the technical terms. But
Yeah, all right.
but if you do want to bring any other departments up to help explain that, and then I'm sure the applicant team will address that as well.
Peter, you have a question?
It seems to me that this is all conditional upon getting that other report and getting the staff approval. So absent that, then it goes away. They have not complied with the requirement.
That's
So
correct.
there should, you get your report, you make your decision, and if it's a yay, that's fine. If it's a nay, well, then it essentially is gone away, is dead.
Go ahead, Hillary, or Randy, is that?
Well, it is kind of a moving target, because if they come back with a mitigation plan and it's not acceptable to one of the departments, that doesn't end it. They can go back to the drawing board and try to come up with something new. But yes, there are, the PUD and subdivision approvals will expire at some point, although extensions can be granted.
Right.
But the conditions are basically that they cannot develop this property until the mitigation is approved by the city.
Okay.
I have another question.
Go ahead, Lynn.
We do PUDs all over the city, and we demand that they connect to one another. I have a problem with this PUD. We've got an adjacency in Riverwalk, got 2 nice streets right there, and we're not connected. Right across the street, we have another development that looks just like this because it's the same developer. Again, that entryway does not connect, and it's obviously missing here. And I don't know if anyone called that, but we demand this all over the city, and yet for some reason this pocket can just ignore it. I got an issue. I don't think this has connectivity. I think it looks like it dropped out of space. And we're denying all these nice streets, and we're adding another street name, a couple of street names that are random. So I just don't think this fits with what we already own and have on the ground here in Asphalt. So I really challenge on why that wasn't even addressed here, on why we don't have connectivity.
Then let me ask you a clarification. When you say connectivity, are you connecting to the Centennial Trail or just the neighborhoods?
No, the neighborhoods. I mean, we've got neighborhoods right across
okay.
the street that's got an alignment. We've got another neighborhood behind that that's got 2 perfectly good streets that dead end into this development. And it's the same developer. And I know the style, I know the look, and again, we're gonna corral this around with a fence, another charcoal colored fence down there. We did not ask Riverstone to put in a bunch of fences, but now all we have is corrals and stockyards. And this is what this is looking like, a stockyard.
Perhaps maybe you'll let the applicant come up.
Yeah, I'll
and
let
we
the
can- you
applicant
can,
address that.
bullet point that to the applicant on there, because and I'm not saying your comments aren't warranted, but, connectivity, I see something going to the Centennial Trail on this little map, but I
I'm talking
understand what you.
I'm talking about cars and actual functional streets.
Okay, so you're talking
Yeah.
about
Streets.
motor vehicles
Motor
more.
vehicles.
Okay.
We do that with PUDs here all the time, and there are
Okay.
different operators, different owners, but we align the streets.
Yeah. Well,
so
let's
that they
leave
have
that up
connectivity.
to the applicant right now. Peter, you have another
Well, maybe
question? Sorry.
maybe we can ask staff, how many other PUDs are like this where they're all, you say walled off? I mean, they don't have any connectability.
It's just mainly the few that are in the Riverstone area.
To them. All in
So there-
Riverstone,
But there's
All
some up,
Riverstone.
there are some up north too that are gated
very few.
and have fences around them, so.
Yeah, the
I'm
smaller
sympathetic with that.
subdivisions, the smaller
The smaller
PUDs,
PUDs tend to try to get
they're
a
kind of
cul-de-sac.
on their own little island, some of them,
Yeah.
and they're not connected to other neighborhoods that are larger and older developed ones, and there's just some that aren't. But I hear your point, and we'll ask the applicant to kind of
obvious.
explain that. Mike, you go ahead. You got a question?
I do, actually, I have a question. I believe, looking at the reports from the various departments, the fire department, is Bobby Gonder here tonight? Or somebody from the fire department that could
I think
perhaps?
that's the only department that's probably not.
Darn it, okay, because that was the question, because actually it ties directly
Knox
to,
box.
no, can I speak? It has nothing to do with that, it has to do with actually what you were talking about, and that is, I see that the fence where Mastis in this proposed PUD lines up, I'm assuming, and that's an assumption again, but Aviera, or however you might pronounce that, new street in this proposed PUD, Aviera is in Riviera Walk, Mastis is in the proposed PUD, and if those two streets should happen to line up, I didn't know if the fire department could
They don't
impose a separate condition, or an additional condition, such that maybe that section of gate could be removed, so that there is an opportunity for the fire department to at least have connectivity through, if a fire in one dwelling starts to move across the whole area, it'd be perhaps an opportunity to address safety concerns, while keeping that community separate by the fence, because I'm aware that they're both going to be private
Yeah,
HOAs and private homeowners,
That's correct.
everything. So therefore, to have it fenced off is acceptable, in my opinion. But again, you see what I'm saying?
yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. That'd probably be a fire department question.
It could be a Knox box.
Yeah, exactly.
Between those two.
I'm not for sure how,
PUDs.
I think there's a green space between here actually, and there's no pavement between there and this subdivision, so it may be difficult to tie this one in rather than up here.
Okay. Right, down, and then that would be the one closer to the river end,
Yeah,
so, okay.
okay,
Okay,
all right, thank you.
thanks, Mike. And it's time for the applicant to come up.
Good afternoon, Dennis Cunningham, Active West.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, Dennis?
I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
311 Coeur d'Alene Avenue, Suite C. Maybe to go back a couple steps, originally when we were down looking in Riverstone, we had put an offer on all of the property in that phase, which is where the low-cost housing is, as well as the Riviera Walk and the District project is. And we were beat out on some of that acquisition by Todd Prescott and Whitewater. So we moved forward with a 5+ acre parcel where we had proposed and built Riviera Walk. I think most of the residents are here, living in the homes and in that development that we built. At that time, we were looking at going up in the C-17 with a multifamily product after we had moved through that phase. We're not a super large builder, so we can only take on so much construction. So we had worked diligently with some geotech companies out of Seattle and with one of the architects over there on a 4.5-story building that was meeting the C-17 height standards. And then I sit on a couple committees nationally and locally with Parkwood, some of their people. And when we had talked and they were getting ready to propose their R34 with multifamily, I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't try to just go and do the same thing on our site. And so then I kind of regrouped and thought, well, maybe we can come in with some smaller, mostly single family. We built about 20, or probably about 85% of my product is single family. We'll throw in 15 to 20% two-story. So we looked at the site, looked at the soils, looked at the loads on the foundations, and that formula started to work a little bit better. Smaller, single-family type product there. So that's what you have before you is the district. Connectivity of the community with the adjacent property owner. That is a private street, and so they have their own reserve funds and maintenance that would need to be addressed if we were to bring a new HOA and a new development with them. This 2.23 acre parcel is not part of that HOA, and it's not part of a PUD. So one of you guys could propose a development there. So then the question is, you would have to confront these guys about access, maintenance, and whatever it is. It's not insurmountable, but it's not like this is intertwined together right now. As it relates to setbacks, as you guys know, your engineering department has approved a 5-foot minimum on both sides now. So Active West is not in the business of trying to deviate from that. So these will all have 5-yard side yard setbacks compared to 13 years ago at Meadow Ranch, where I got 80 homes and we were doing 0 lot lines in 5. Here, we've now opened it up to there's 5 on each side to either address water or snow. We've also had to work with Avista because of snow cover on meters and access, and that seems to be working as well as your departments. There was one other, as it relates to the fire department, and I don't know how to cite the code, but I think when you have a cul-de-sac that loads up more than 32 units, then there needs to be a second entrance, which is a firebox or whatever. We've met with the fire department, and they've been in 3 of the pre-development meetings. We've had the T road down there has to meet those radiuses as well as the distance of the fire truck, as well as our snow easements can't invade into their turnaround during the winter, and that's been addressed down on a fire access basis. So back to where we were, we had 38 units in a multi-story building. We've dropped 35% of the density, went down to probably primarily single-story, and now you have a 24 unit. I'm not proposing an R34 zone change here to double up the density. So we believe it's a lower impact product down there. Part of what you see is some smaller units. We're finding that the single ownership and affordability, and I know affordability in Riverstone's probably an oxymoron, but the numbers that we're seeing down there, we're trying to introduce a nice product that can get into the 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, 1,600, and not all of them being that, 16 plus. This this property, the 2.23 acres, is a separate site. It's a separate PUD, and it would have its own HOA. So it's not attached, Mrs. Fleming said, like Riviera Place, Riviera Court, Riviera Walk. This is a different LLC. It'll be a different HOA. It'll be a different PUD. There was, anyway, so that one of the only reasons, and I know this was an issue when we came with Riviera Walk, the issue of the gated there and Riviera Walk was not to be exclusive. I don't know if just this last weekend there was a big wedding at the park. And so with it being private streets, there's these weekends where there's continuous traffic that comes down they unload whatever, their pets, their kids, the people, and they go and enjoy the amenities. That's a lot of loading on these roads. And so we would look at the city to be providing parking solutions for the amenities and the open space and not us as private developers. So that's why both of those projects got gated. We didn't think Riviera Court with your parking pocket housing ordinance needed to be gated. But I know you've heard, I've owned real estate in Belle Reve. I know you've heard Belle Reve and why they want a gate here. So it's not just to be exclusive, it's just a lot of people from out of town coming in, parking for half the day in front of these people's houses. You know, so that's kind of why you see the gate there. It's not to raise the price or, you know, make it some kind of exclusive neighborhood. I don't know if I go ahead.
So if these weren't private streets, then the public could park on them.
One more time.
If these weren't private streets, then the public could park on them.
If they were private,
If they weren't private,
yes, sir, they would be. Like, well, that's an interesting, if they were public, the public can park on it.
so you're suggesting that the city, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said the parking's an issue there because they're private streets and you don't want people to park on them. So the city should open up the parking lot for the people that use the
And I think
amenities.
you are. I mean, I've seen some of the recent Atlas plans.
Well, it just strikes me as an argument to have public streets, not private streets.
It's a way to provide in front of all these neighbors' houses, yeah, have them drop off. They would still, if, the thing about that is if you still fence it, they still have to go out to John Loop, come down through the Park District, Monty's Bollard, to where you guys drop that and allow the events to happen, the concerts and weddings. Where now, I think you're expanding your parking on the riverside to allow some more access into that way.
Well, the private streets have a detrimental effect in some respects to the city, to our residents.
I'm trying to think, my my 3 pocket housings that we've recently done, or 4, we had private or public. And then we've probably done 5 with private. So we've done both.
But you know what you're getting into. You know the use of the park and so forth. And then you have concerns by public using that because it's private. So I think, well, that concern would go away by making it a public street.
I'm not sure.
Well, there is a gate you're proposing for this.
But we're proposing a private street.
Yeah,
I mean,
private
if it goes
street with the
public,
gate,
there's no
so-
gate, so that's a whole different project concept.
Yeah, so it's a private street, they've got to maintain it, they've got to take care
Oh,
of
yeah,
it.
but the public doesn't get to use it, so all of a sudden, all the use on the park and it causes some problems for for the area.
Okay,
So by us doing this, the proposal is that the city spend money, provide parking that is not available on private streets.
okay.
I guess you could,
I know we have, and so right now, because there's nothing there, John Loop down there where the bus station, that loop there, has parking on both sides, and that's where, like this last weekend, you saw quite a few cars, the sidewalk, and then they get that controlled access down that trail to I call it the event area that's pretty active. But I also have seen recent plans where the city is providing additional space to get some access in there.
we've had similar conversations in Northtown too, where, now they're not private streets there, but there's a lot of concern.
Okay. More questions of Dennis at this time?
Yeah,
ahead.
John?
John?
And Mr. Cunningham, could you maybe share your thoughts? Mr. Adams referred to this GEO report as kind of a, quote, moving target. I think there's some concerns of staff, maybe some concerns up here, that maybe moving target's not a great way to do planning. If we're going to have, you know, even though they're public streets, private streets, private buildings and such, it's kind of your responsibility to do it right. But there's going to be city infrastructure that gets deeded over in the form of water, wastewater structures and stuff cited on that fill. Why wouldn't it be best to get all the GEO done up front before we move forward?
Well, we've had a couple powwows with some of your department heads and legal, and sort of the challenge is, for us, is how much down the road do we go to analyze all that if we don't get approval here? So we've got about $75,000 of consulting in front of us that I really don't want to go out and continue to do borings and water testings and soil analysis if you guys tell me to go away. And so I appreciate everything you said, because I understand that. But for us, we're trying to say, if this moves forward, then I think your legal staff has provided an opportunity to say, our departments need to review this, insert our mitigation measures, and then I will look at it and say, we can't afford it. It's $900,000 just to do two things. So the utilities then won't get provided. And so if you spin it and look at my situation, I'm kind of, obviously, you know, we're willing to do due diligence and spend money, but I don't want to go out and start putting equipment out there and do an analysis if we don't even get across this line. And so that's sort of where we're at. I do believe, based upon the team that's on board, because my site's not a whole lot different than the bank in Tilford that was approved around the pond. We do believe, with some recent information, when I say recent, within the last few months, that we're going to find resolution that we can present that I think will get us to a point that has some economics that work. And as you know, we're going to be over there with $20-some million of real estate that I also am on the hook for. You have a utility, one or two, but I mean, I'm the guy that's really going to bear that. So we might have, we've been candid with your staff. If it doesn't come together, we might have to look at another land use. And so the next zoning use that we've looked at, and we've ran some numbers since my last staff meeting, is what use doesn't require utilities? And that would be mini storage. So we would go down under the C-17 zoning by right and put the mini storage, because now I don't have to put water and sewer in. Because the land is sitting there, it's not open space. And so I don't know what direction to kind of shift. But if it does become astronomical, I can't sit there and pay taxes on 2.23 acres in C-17. I mean, these guys just got their assessments. They just raised these guys' houses $30,000 to $40,000 this year, not the last 2 or 3 years. So there's, you know, there's an economic as a businessman. There's a practicality of geotech and risk. And so when we left the multi-story and we went to primarily single level, then we started to look at the PSIs on our foundations. And so we believe that we're going to, but that's not 100%. We're going to navigate through that. But you guys will eventually, you guys being the departments, will have that opportunity.
Go ahead, John.
So you answered that very well. Thank you. I get it. I get that. I
Not
get
a
it.
geotech.
Which is, let's look at kind of the conceptual direction we're going and see if that's going to fly otherwise. And then if it does, You know, you don't want to invest, you know, numerous thousands of dollars more in geo until we say the other parameters are okay or not okay. So to shift gears to one of those other ones, and Commissioner Fleming touched on that. Take me back, if you would, and I could have sworn, and I could be wrong, that when Riviera came along, there was kind of a hint at that time. You know, we knew that that site was there, that belonged to you. It had a history of, you know, going to be a parking lot for a fitness center. You know those stories.
Correct, you bet.
And everybody knew the soils are questionable. That's a great place for a parking lot, you know, for a fitness center on questionable soil. Great fit there. But I kind of thought that when Riviera came along, there was at least a hint, no commitment, but a hint that maybe, you know, if these soils were determined to be okay, that this might progress as a kind of an expansion or another phase, if you will, to where, you know, we don't have two little gated pockets right next to each other, to where, you know, the mail truck goes down the street, he has to log into one gate, go in and do his mail, and come out, log into another gate. You know, that's where these kind of inefficiencies, and it's not that we don't like little gated communities. It's how many you have in one given area. You know, Coeur d'Alene Place is a great big development. It has 3
Right.
for the whole deal. You know, if there was a bunch of them right next to each other, it starts to, you know, create, I think, some of the descriptions that Commissioner
Sure.
Fleming's. Was there? Am I wrong? Was there some notion that this might be an expansion of Riviera?
No, that's not an inaccurate statement, that at that time, 3 or 4 years ago, there could have been a connectivity in there. Remember, though, at that time, and I had prefaced that, we were looking at a multi-story building. And the challenge that I get in with there is when I have an HOA that's paying for snow plow and some irrigation and gates, and then I move into a condominium that's got elevators and common area, and you try to commingle those, and it does get a little bit challenging, because then the group there is not paying for that HOA, and we can separate that.
I do remember the vision now of the taller unit.
Yeah, and
It's coming back now.
but I'm at that, and so as time goes on, and then we're not in, as I mentioned, legally, and I'm not an attorney, but this 2.2 acres, and 2.2 acres is not a small pad in an infill situation. I mean, you guys are in the business. If you wander around and try to find 2.2 acres south of the freeway, I mean, I don't think this is just an island. Tilford's only 1 point something acres. But then to say that the PUD is not connected in the HOA, then how do we annex into that HOA and then look at some type of shared amenities or shared maintenance or shared reserves? And so with an HOA that's pretty vocal in a positive way, I think you guys have heard Riviera Walk HOA at the Atlas meetings, et cetera. You know, that does create also a little bit of a challenge, is try to commingle that. I mean, there's stub roads down there to connect, but as you heard from staff, some of them are handling some stormwater per your PUD and stormwater requirements. So I don't know how we kind of cross over that. But to go back to your original question, yes, there was some discussion, but when you start talking multi-story with single family, just the insurance and the reserve funds on that building at 4 stories, it does become challenging with the existing HOA that's detached single family.
Thank you.
Dennis, how do you feel about this project without a gate?
What was that word?
How do you feel about this project if it didn't have a gate?
Well, the challenge, if it didn't have a gate, then you're probably going to see me have to push up multi-story, because your road widths will change based upon your city standards of a public street.
Okay,
So I would then be forced to go vertical, because you're going to take the road and open it up
right.
with less footprint, and I have to get some square footage in there. So then I would go vertical
Okay,
a little more.
okay.
And I'm being honest, back when Gordon and these guys were here and we were talking about gates, and it was a challenge with Riviera Walk, it wasn't so I can raise the price and be exclusive. It was just, how far do we go to provide public parking for amenities that we borrow? They're down there, your pond, your Centennial Trail, some of the events that take place. I love them all. That's why I'm buying real estate down there.
No, I understand. Any other questions for Dennis at this time? No? Okay, I'm sure he'll be
Hey,
back.
thanks a lot, appreciate it.
All right. First person I have on the list is Dallas Thompson, and did not wish to speak, but is opposed. Okay. Jody Katzer is in favor and does not wish to testify. Kurt Katzer is in favor and does wish to speak a little bit. Just state your name and I'll swear you in, Kurt.
Kurt Katzer.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, you got a couple of minutes.
All right. So I am a resident of Riviera Walk at Riverstone 2188 West Aviara Place. And of course, we adjoin the subject property. And I guess initially I had 3 issues, but I think at first I should make it 4. And I just want to state that after this last winter, we don't have that map up, but we did end up using all of that area off the end of Aviara Drive, which could potentially go through to the subject property for snow storage for the whole development. So the ends of those other streets are very tight with homes and stuff. So we had to use a loader and move a lot of that snow into that area where our swales are and that off the end of there. So taking that street through would really limit our snow removal for that subdivision. My second point then would be street stormwater. So we have an area, and it's part of Riviera Parkway and Estancia Drive that actually didn't get connected to the stormwater swales. And some of that water runs off and under the fence onto the subject property. So we just want to make sure that that's known at this time, that, ahead of time as far as, so we don't have any liability there. So the third point would be we landscaping along Johns Loop. So the Riviera Walk Homeowners Association has been maintaining the landscaping in front of the subject property. This responsibility and cost needs to be transferred as soon as possible to the district at Riverstone. And my last point would be there's some utility panels, an electric service and breaker panel that is for the Riviera Walk entrance area, but they are attached to the district's side of the fence, so to the back side of the fence for us. And we would just ask that that stuff gets moved to the other side of the fence so that we can access them in the future.
Okay. A lot of those issues, maybe Mr. Cunningham can address when he has a chance to come back.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate it. Leslie Valapicelli, she did not indicate anything. David and Shirley, sorry I can't make out the last name, did not indicate anything at all. Ken and Sherry Bino did not indicate anything at all. Dennis, I don't think this is you, but Dayton Cunningham? No? No? Okay. No? Okay. Didn't indicate anything. Doris DeFininis, sorry again, is just opposed and didn't indicate whether you want to speak or not. Jean DeFinis, again, is opposed but did not indicate anything if you wanted to speak. that is everyone that signed up. Is there anyone here that's changed their mind that wants to speak before I ask Dennis to come up and perhaps address any of the comments that Kurt made as far as what he said? Dennis, you want to come up and maybe address a few of those issues that were just mentioned? Please? I believe
Dennis at
there was some
Active West.
stormwater runoff, a panel, landscaping, those issues.
The snow storage that was mentioned, there are three large there's three areas that where snow storage at Riviera Walk goes, and I think those are also in snow easements. And the one that Mr. Katzker was referring to is where the storm swale system is and some of the dry wells. So that is a good area for that snow storage because it is then running in through that filtration of soil as well as in the dry wells. Utility boxes, they're correct. There are some utility boxes that are in right-of-ways out there of a private road that will probably get, through the site improvement plans with engineering, will probably get modified some. There's actually a couple old easements on the 2.23 acres that will be vacated because your staff has now redirected us to go over to the pond, towards the pond to sewer. So there are some things that'll get cleaned up through that site improvement plan.
Landscaping, I think.
Landscaping, and that's sort of an interesting mix there. This HOA, a percentage of their fee each month goes to a master Riverstone HOA. And in my opinion, John Loop has been the stepchild of maintenance in the entire Riverstone. If you go down there, we have ducks swimming in our swales. There are trees that have electrical boxes, but there's no trees in water. So I believe that I would challenge this HOA to continue to get involved in the master HOA because they're paying, because some of that maintenance out in front on John Loop is not being taken care of, and they're paying for it. That will be something that we would want to address as well as in the district, because it just continues on. I don't know about the specific maintenance area that they're paying for and not in front of the district. But if they're paying, I mean, obviously, we're gonna get in and start to have to deal with irrigation, and some of that. But some of that is the right-of-way of John Loop, not their ownership or mine. So I'm sure we'll have some blending in there.
Yeah, the HOA is a little out of our jurisdiction, but yeah, you
you're
guys
looking
figure
at
it
two
out.
now. You're looking at Riviera Walk HOA, and then there's this layer of the Riverstone Master HOA that they pay a small percentage into because they're supposed to snowplow our sidewalks, maintain thatch, fertilize, trim, cut grass, maintain the street trees, et cetera. And my personal opinion, not speaking for them, is there is some neglect on John Loop. And some of those buildings have been there a long time.
Okay, appreciate that. Any other question? Go ahead.
Mr. Cunningham, one last question, if I could. As Planner Mike Beharry said, there's 15 conditions. You're familiar with all of those, and you can live with them?
Yes, but you know that there's one sitting in there that we have to really iron out, that's got a lot of zeros behind it. And we might not be back to you guys, except with another type of project that doesn't require sewer and water. So I'm gonna roll up my sleeves, put some effort into it. I know there's some development around the pond. And we've moved into a team that's got more experience.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'll let you know, but I think you'll see pretty soon if there's anything.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, Dennis, thank you. At this time, I'm going to close public testimony and give it to the commissioners to discuss some more and perhaps get a vote. But before we do that, I've got a question either for Randy or staff. There's two hearing and two findings we have to make. We make findings for each one individually, and depending on what the first one does, it's going to affect what the second one is.
Correct, so you would do the order of the PUD first, because you can't do the subdivision without the PUD.
Right, okay. So I wanted to make sure we understood what we were doing. So, go ahead.
Well, I'd just say a little discussion. I had some real concerns. The GEO report was a major concern for me. And like Commissioner Fleming mentioned, I had some concerns with the, having two pocket little subdivisions right next to each other, each with its own gate, gave me some heartburn. But I think having the opportunity to discuss this with the developer, I get it. I understand, kind of the evolution behind it. And we're here deciding with what we have before us today, not what Riviera might have become or whatnot. And I think Mr. Cunningham answered the geotech issue pretty well. I don't think it's realistic for him to go spend 10, 20K on another report when we haven't answered whether we're okay with this on just kind of the macro basis. So I can't help but to think here's a project that we can see and touch and look at, and it's going to be very much, at the end of the day, it's going to look like an extension of Riviera. I think Riviera is a good project. I think Mr. Cunningham has done good projects around town. They're all, the Circuit, the Meadow Ranch, and this Riviera, I think are all very worthy projects. So I think with the GEO report adequately conditioned, I think this project merits our approval.
I'd like to make a quick comment too. The testimony from the one resident, and I'm sorry I don't recall your last name, but nonetheless, you explained the challenges with the snow this past winter, and then of course hearing a little bit more from Mr. Cunningham regarding the dry wells that are in place to help with the removal of any storm waters and or the eventual melt off of all that snow. I think was a very good, it was good to have that factual information given to us. So I do appreciate you taking the time to explain that to us. Okay.
Peter?
Well, it just seems to me that I sympathize with what Ms. Fleming was talking about. But we've sort of put ourselves, to be consistent, we should, I'm in support of this. I think if we need to do something, we need to do it in our comprehensive plan so that we can stay out of these areas where they're marching down. If I understand correctly, the property to the left there, those are private roads.
Mm-hmm.
So, and once we set a series of private roads in, we can't take connectability with other set of private roads, I think, may cause some issues and so forth. I think this is an area we need to consider and talk about during our comprehensive modification if there is something that we need to do in that area. I am going to support this.
Go ahead, Lynn, you got anything to say?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
You have 2 minutes.
I'll give you 2 minutes. When we fence off multiple properties within this area, I'm afraid that this is going to also come to the table again at Atlas. And think about Garden, think about Sanders, think about all the areas in the city that are lovely and that are accessible. And we don't have to walk beside a black fence for what could be, quite a few lots on all the way around. So we're up against a black fence and charcoal fence, whatever you want to call it. And it does not make for a good reach out to the public. I think it is very denigrating, and I think it is something we should not and will not encourage in Atlas. And I feel sorry that we feel that we need to do this. You're in a primo site. This is a beautiful site. It looks over the lake, but everyone's got their back turned to it. So now we're looking in people's back windows as we walk through the park and look across at this. Same thing with John Stone's development. He turned his back on a beautiful, interactive parkland, and we are ignoring it. And I feel sorry that we can't vision it. And if we have to put mini storage down there, then yes, I will approve this as a, PUD, because hell, I don't want to see mini storages on this. That would be absolutely criminal. So for me, it's inhuman. I just think that a big black corral around this is not aesthetically pleasing. I don't think it's giving back to the city, and I think long-term, it's not a good solution. These smaller houses, I get it. It's great to be able to live down there, but you're still, you've got one right across the street, same thing. That's not gated, but it is fenced. So why are we fencing and gating this in again? So I'm not a big advocate of this solution in this location, and I hate to see this impact our Atlas, because I'm going to be adamant, we are not going to fence in and corral in multiple lots inside of that development. I just think it sends a bad message to the public. Coming here as new investors and small families, I just think it's negative. So, yep.
Okay, thank you. I would support this if I had a vote on it, but I don't, unless it's a tie. But, gated communities, mixed feelings on some of those, but again, it's in an area that we have a gated community and kind of fits. I understand the feelings of connectivity, in this particular one. It's just not going to happen because how it was developed. And, yeah, we can go back years and wish and said what it could have been, but this is what we have in front of us today. So, like I said, if I had a vote, I would support this, but I would now move for a motion on this particular item, and one motion at a time, and we go from that. So, John, go right ahead.
Be happy to do that. I'll muddle through the findings in the form of a motion. So I would motion that this be a matter that's come before the Planning Commission tonight, June 11, 2019, and there has been a person present requesting approval for PUD 1-19, a request for a proposed 2.23 acre planned unit development known as the District at Riverstone, applicant being the Unfolding LLC. Location is 2744 North Riviera Parkway. Motion would include that we include the findings B1 through B7, which are in the staff report as statements of fact, and that we include finding B8A, which would be that the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan. I would suggest that all of the staff included objectives that are listed in our worksheet be included for the record, and that this particularly dovetails into 1.11, 1.12 community design, as well as 1.14 efficiency of existing infrastructure. And I would point out that the comp plan for the Spokane River corridor area that this is in makes a statement that it would envision 10 to 16 dwelling units per acre. So this would be right in that. So supported by the comp plan, that we include B8B, that the design and planning of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent property, and that is based on the fact that the architectural style, layout of the buildings, the streetscape, et cetera, is going to be very similar to what is immediately to the west as its neighbor. B8C finding, we include the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. Other than the underground soil report work to be done, other than that, it's a very forgiving site, flat topography, et cetera. Should be a very easily manageable site. B8D, we include the finding that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public utilities, and services, and that is based on all of the staff comments in our report, as those that Mike pointed out in his report, that water, wastewater, and all traffic street network supports this. We include B8E in the motion that the proposal provides a common open space of 10%. That was in the staff report, and the applicant touched on that as well, of how that would be used. B8F, that the off-street parking would be, the proposal provides enough parking sufficient for users of the development, and that's based on the staff analysis. And B8G, that the proposal does provide for a method for perpetual maintenance, and that is based on both the staff report as well as the applicant's discussion of a HOA for perpetual maintenance. So with that, as a conclusion, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned would find that the request of the Unfolding LLC for the approval of the planned unit development as described in the application should be approved with 15 conditions that I choose not to read that are documented in the staff report. That is the motion.
Thank you very much. I have a motion. Need a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a second by Ward. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming,
No.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Aye.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay. PUD 1-19 passes. Now on to S-1-19. Looking for a motion. John?
I'll just roll if that's okay. So S-119, this again is a matter that's come before the Planning Commission tonight for 24 lots and 5 tracts, preliminary plat request for the district at Riverstone, applicant the Unfolding LLC for 2.23 acres located at 2744 North Riviera Parkway. Motion would recommend that we adopt findings B1 through B6 as statements of fact in our worksheet, and B7A, that we make the finding that the plat requirements have been met, and that is as attested by the city engineer in their staff report that all the plat requirements have been met, that we include B7B, finding that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-way, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and utilities are adequate. Once again, that's based on the analysis of staff and their attestment in the staff report and the presentation. The finding B7C, we adopt that the proposed preliminary plat does comply with all the subdivision design standards with the conditioned deviations in the PUD. And B7D, that the lots in the proposed preliminary plat as approved in the PUD with the deviations meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. So with that, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of the Unfolding for the preliminary plat of approval as described in the application should be approved with 15 conditions that are documented in the worksheet.
Thank you, John. I have a first. I'm looking for a second.
Second.
I have a second by Ward. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming,
No.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, S-1-19 passes. Okay. Moving on to our next public hearing. A proposed 6.125 acre annexation from county rural residential to city R1. Item number A-3-19. And staff will give us a little report.
Thank you for your patience as I found my page. Get this out of my face. I've heard that I can come across a little bit loud to the people at home sometimes, so adjust my microphone a little bit. Okay, so tonight, before you, you have annexation 319, which is zoning prior to annexation, as this will go forward to city council for the ultimate call, of 6.156 acres from county ag suburban to city R1. Wanted to point out real quickly that the PO box that was listed in the staff report was actually not correct, and up here on the screen, the address for Potlatch Hill Road is the accurate address of the applicant. So it's a portion of an existing parcel legally described as Elk Point Lot 2, Block 1, commonly known as 4176 East Potlatch Hill Road. So this is the proposed annexation map. As you can see in yellow here denotes the extent of the property. And city property runs along the north side of the property, as you can see in the next following picture. The red denotes where city limits is at. The white dashed line is the subject property. Armstrong PUD is further up the road. Fernand Lake to the north, Coeur d'Alene Golf Course across I-90, and Coeur d'Alene Lake to the kind of the southwest. So there was some information provided under general information that was given to us by our deputy city attorney discussing the history of the property. And also in your staff report on page 3 is a general description of what an R1 zone is. Here is the ag suburban map. This is from the county, and you can see it is green. There are some findings that need to be made, just like every other public hearing before you hear tonight, that for an annexation. So finding B8 is that the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies. It can be found in the southeast hillside district of the comprehensive plan. It is contiguous with the existing city limits. Here is that map. You can see the black denotes the outline of southeast hillside, and the white dashed line denotes the subject property. Once again, city limits is red. It is a transition area where the character of neighborhoods is in transition and should be developed with care. Southeast hillside description from the comp plan. This is the today portion of that. It talks about what it looked like in 2007. It's still a fairly largely undeveloped area, and land ownership ranges from 3 to approximately 140 acres in the area. Southeast hillside tomorrow. It's envisioned to be a sparsely developed area with preservation of its natural vegetations, views, and vistas, with open space being the main priority. And then there's some characteristics of the southeast hillside that are listed below in the bullet points. And this is about as small as my font can get and still be somewhat readable. So it does fall within the special areas portion of the comp plan as well, specifically hillsides and landmarks. And I underlined here that Blackwell Hill and the slopes above Fernand Lake within our planning area also contribute to the setting and help define our physical image. The surface is often fragile, and because of that, it would fall under the hillside code, so it would require a geotech. We just talked extensively about geotechs and what needs to be done for construction on any specific site. And here are the policies and the methods that the comp plan calls out for hillside landmarks. And the goals and objectives that apply to this request. And those are spelled out specifically in your staff report on page 8. So finding B9 is that public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. Chris Bosley, our city engineer, discusses stormwater and that it would be addressed at the time that the annexation develops, so at the time of building permit, and all the requirements of the city must be met. So streets, it has frontage along the north and south sides of Potlatch Hill Road, and it's only developed with areas developed only to the south, and it has served as access to Armstrong Park neighborhood for many years. So the water department comments and conditions were provided in the settlement and annexation agreements, which were attached to your staff report at the end. That was provided by Kyle Marine. And wastewater, so there is an 8-inch public sanitary sewer and multiple sewer laterals that exist in Potlatch Hill and Sky Harbor Drive. Does fall within the area of city impact, and according to their master plan, there is capacity and willingness to serve the property. Although it says if there's any increase in density, it may require modeling to take a look at the sewer flows more closely. Fire department, this is pretty boilerplate language for them, that they will take a look at access and protection at the time of permit. So finding B10 is that the physical characteristics of the site make or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. So as mentioned earlier, it would be annexed under the city's hillside regulations, which limit the amount of area you can disturb. It controls the color of the house. Significant trees must be maintained. Those sorts of items that are applicable would be applied to the property. And as you can see here, it is a fairly steep property. These are 5-foot contours that are in white here, and in yellow denotes the request for annexation. On to photos of the subject property. You can see here, this is the eastern property line along Sky Harbor Drive, and this is looking north. And then at the time that I went out to take photos, they were surveying the site, so I wasn't able to see any pins, but what I would assume is a corner or somewhat close to it was here with a fence post, and you can see that there is fairly aggressive slopes associated with the property. And here's a picture that was taken from above at Potlatch Hill Road, looking northwest. And looking northeast from the same location. And finding B11 is that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regards to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. Once again, Chris Bosley, our city engineer, weighed in on the traffic portion of this request and says that it would not adversely affect the surrounding area with traffic. The neighborhood character is commonly associated with the access to Armstrong Park. Many of these areas are very densely treed, and a number of the homes there, just a guesstimate is 25 to a third of the properties up there are hillside developed properties. And some of the lots provide very commanding views of the area. It's a beautiful place. So generalized land uses, as you can see here, the blue denotes civic, so we do have a golf course. This property was deeded to the city a few years ago, and then the subject property shown here in the dashed white line again, as well as city limits denoted in red, and then the some vacant and some not vacant single-family homes that are located up in Armstrong Park. This is the existing zoning of the area. R3 to the north, R3 PUD is associated with the Armstrong Park area, and then C17 PUD for Hagedon's portion of property that he owns out there. So action alternatives. Planning Commission must consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve. So this is a little different than most of your annexations out there is there is a settlement agreement that has been signed by the mayor. There is also the annexation agreement, which has been worked out prior to. If you had read the staff report, the explanation that Randy gave was pretty in-depth as to the reason why this request is being made. And your findings worksheet are attached to your staff report. If there are any questions.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Sean. Good report. Appreciate that. In the settlement agreement, there's a little map. It's not a plat map, but it's a map that shows lots, and it looks like there's 6 lots. One of them is, I think, Elk Point. The second one is on the south side of the road. Looks like there's 4 lots depicted. It looks like the annexation area has 4 lots. Is that your understanding?
There is a request. It is a short subdivision, and that does not, 4 or less that would come through. And this, as mentioned at the beginning, this is a portion of Lot 2. So the remainder portion down there where it has 2 is the other part that would remain in the county at this time.
So of the area that's on, I'm going to say north of the road, the annexation area, would it be your expectation, given the R1 zoning, 6 acres to deal with, probably 4 lots, that we're talking 4 houses?
Correct, yeah. I mean, there is the availability at this time to do like an ADU, but it's subject to the hillside code, so it would most likely have to be attached or be part of the dwelling unit.
Having to do with the settlement agreement, if this annexation was denied, does that mean the settlement agreement is dead?
And here's Randy.
And here's where I'm coming from.
Right.
And here's where I'm coming from is whenever we look at annexations, we're looking for benefits. You know, a lot of times we're looking to close those goofy donut holes of yours and such. This isn't.
Which I own them, sorry.
This isn't one of those donut holes quite in its classic way. But I'm sure the applicant's going to tell us about enhanced police and fire access and fuels management and all good things. And that's great. But back to the settlement agreement, is one of the benefits that we're looking at here if the settlement agreement dies, then the conditions in the settlement agreement dies. And if I read it correctly, one of those is the perpetual easement that the people uphill rely on to get to their homes. I don't know how many 100 homes or whatever there are up there, is kind of up in the air right now. So if I live up at the top of Sky Harbor Drive or whatever that is up there, I got kind of a question mark hanging, don't I, of whether I can get to my home next year.
I would answer yes, but for an in-depth response, I would look to our legal department.
So is one benefit that we have on the table here, in addition to police and fire access and some of these things, that we clean up a pretty important access easement, no?
That is certainly one of the major considerations in the settlement agreement, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
And I see Troy Tymason out there. I'm hoping maybe he might be the historian on this one. Sean, the area that was deeded to the city on the hillside below to the north of what is currently the county boundary to the city boundary, all that to the north, that steep hillside, was there any limitations as to the use of that particular piece that was deeded? It says R3 on the zoning, but I seem to recall, and I'm going to kind of like be like Commissioner Ingalls and ask for some help on that, because I thought it was something to be used for natural use or something like that. But.
Yeah, currently our Parks Department is taking care of that. Now, as to any limitations that are attached to any sort of deed, I don't know exactly what those are. I'd have to do some research and get back to you.
Does anybody know that might be present?
Yeah, Troy might have the best answer, but I know it's for just recreation, some limited trails, but I think it's pretty restricted in terms of how much trails can be built
Right.
in that area.
That's what I was
There's some limitations.
remembering, but again,
Yes.
I don't know the details, but I remember when it was handled, this is probably 3 or 4 or 5 years ago now, roughly.
Yes, there was a couple of lots that were going to go in next to that pump station, and
Right.
they had ended up deeding the entirety of that property to the city. That much I do know.
Right. So again, that is within the city boundaries.
Yes.
It is city land?
It is owned by the city,
Okay.
yeah. And the Parks Department is currently taking care of it. I know Monty personally, and he has been out there, forging trails appropriate with whatever is allowed.
Right, okay. I was making sure I understood ownership as well on that one, so thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Welcome.
It's your turn, applicant. Just state your name and I'll swear you in.
Good evening, my name is Virginia Tate.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
I reside at 4176 East Potlatch Hill Road, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And this property, for those of you who don't know the history on it, was homesteaded. In fact, Potlatch Hill was homesteaded by my family in 1911. Originally, we belonged to the sawmill, which is now the resort golf course, so hence the funky zoning that has lived out there forever and a day. In the 1980s, Armstrong Park was well received by the city as wanting to go in, and they had initially planned to put a road to access that property through the park system that you just mentioned, Mike. That was an engineering nightmare and rather expensive, so the developer came to us with the approval of the city founders at the time, and we allowed the access of the road. If you go far enough back, you will find that there are many references in those documents to a future Tate development. Where I have deviated from that is back in the day, in the 80s, the original development called for 14 lots on that side of the road. My family and I looked at that and felt that 4 was plenty. We like to keep the forest in place, the access for the deer and the elk through, the turkeys, all the things that fly through there. And for reference, if anyone is wondering, we did in fact offer that property, that section of the property to complete the park, and we were rejected by the city. Following that, we said, well, if that's not going to be taken into a park, we do have this pesky little issue of a road easement and a water line, which we have theoretically resolved with our settlement agreement. One of the things we considered in this piece, since that trailhead has been put in, Elk Point, for those of you who have known me many years, Elk Point has received an enormous amount of hobo traffic through there, for want of another word, a lot of transient traffic. There is a chronic issue down on the trailhead because nobody's down there to watch it, of drug trafficking people. And in fact, just this weekend, we had our own little visitor hike up the side of the hill and appear during an event armed to the teeth that we needed to remove before our guests found them. It is our desire that we maintain as rural an atmosphere as possible, but it is also a portion of property that had always intended to be developed, and we have shrunken the development size. Henceforth, we bring that forward. We did discuss this with Fire for many years. Fire had originally approached us years ago about an easement through our property for fire access because, well, you see that initial drop-off in the pictures that Sean showed you. Once you get past that initial drop-off on the side, it levels out dramatically, and it was, in fact, the easiest access prior to Bobby Gonder. This would have been under, help me out, who was there before Bobby? Lauper. He, in fact, had approached us for an access, which then passed, that extension passed, and we've moved on. One of the problems that happens with that parcel and the trails down there is as I said, we get a lot of trespassers. We get a lot of people camping out down there. It was our feeling after talking to fire and police that some eyes down on the road would help, but not too many eyes. With 1 acre lots, just greater than 1 acre lots, you're not seeing a large development. Certainly the lots up in Armstrong Park are much more dense than what we've looked at. I did notice a piece in there about the stormwater, and I wanted to address that. When the road was put in, all the stormwater was put in place. There are laterals in place for all of the sewer needs, especially since we're just proposing 4 lots. The only issue that was not completed and caused the settlement agreement was the water line, for some reason, slipped past inspectors and never got noticed that it was not installed properly, and hence the settlement agreement. Are there any questions I can answer?
No? Oh, John, sorry.
Virginia, on the fire and police access to the area below these 4 lots is in your narrative as a selling point, if you will, a benefit. And you mentioned an easement that you worked out with Bobby Gonder.
They did not act upon that easement, but it was felt that the access with driveways down into there would greatly aid the ability to help any first responder get into the property down below.
So not having a plat map before me, the only thing I have is the little lot map in the annex, the settlement agreement. I was trying to figure out what you were referring to when you talked about, enhancement of police and fire access. And it's just by it being developed, it is sort of country suburban, if you will. I mean, it's not going to be like a subdivision, but it's going to facilitate access.
It will. It'll allow for access points down to the trail. The Fernand Lake Natural Trail, or Fernand Hill Natural Trail, runs alongside the bottom of our 4 lots across the face of the hill. So should someone injure themselves, they would have much greater ease to respond to this person via some driveways there.
Thank you.
That's it?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Stefan Hiroski, favor, just doesn't wish to testify, correct? Okay. That's all I have, so I'm going to close public testimony and bring it to the commissioners to have a discussion and a motion. Go ahead, John.
I'd start with some discussion anyway, and I'd say that, having seen a lot of developments, and we talk about infill projects, and we're on the cusp of doing a new comprehensive plan. And I look back on, when Sean and others put, the original comp plan together, and everybody had a hand in that. And one of the themes of the last comp plan was being darn cautious, as we might progress up into the best hills, the Canfield Hills, the Blackwell Island Hills, Fernand Hills, Potlatch Hills, and any other hill. And this city, I think, has done a great job at adopting hillside development standards and whatnot. So I, for one, up here I'm going to be very cautious and will generally vote down any progression into the wildland interface area, because we see these timberlands burn across the country in these wildland urban interface areas. We see the homes burning in the hilled areas and whatnot, and we look at the TV and say, why in the world did they allow them to build there, or whatnot. So I'm very cautious. That said, I think, this warrants approval because, one, it's very small. I do think it probably aids some fuel management in that area that would actually benefit the greater Armstrong Park area. And I think in this case, as we discussed with the settlement agreement, I think there's a very compelling and unique benefit derived from that, so I'm in favor.
More discussion?
No, I'm in agreement, and especially the fuel control part. I think putting residents there, pushing back some of those trees, it gives them an extra barrier. Even people exiting down from above, you know, the further those trees are away from hanging over the road, the more chance they have of exiting that, maybe on fire for Nan Hill. So I'm supportive of this, and I think it also is cleaning up past problems.
Okay.
So,
More discussion?
I would agree. I'm looking at Exhibit C, the site, the fuel reduction map at the end of our packet, and it's very well thought out, in my opinion, so.
Okay.
need to make a motion.
All right, we're looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
This matter having come before the Planning Commission on June 11th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of item A-3-19, a request for zoning prior to annexation from County Ag Suburban to City R1, the applicant being Virginia Tate, and the portion of an existing parcel legally described as Elk Point Lot 2, Block 1, commonly known as 4176 East Potlatch Hill Road. We've met all the findings B1 through B7. B8, that the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan policies. We're just bringing something into the city that is practical and historically needs to happen. B9, that public facilities and utilities are available and adequate for the proposed use as stated by the various departments, particularly water, and we already are using road maintenance and all that already in place, so it seems to make sense. B10, the physical characteristics of the site do make it suitable for the request at this time. Even though it is a steep slope, we got a lot of those around here, so we managed to build on them. And B11, that the proposal would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. And as we said, cleaning this up, making sure that it's fire safe, will then make a safer thoroughfare if should people need to exit out of that upper development. And then in conclusion, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Virginia Tate for zoning prior to annexation as described in the application should be approved.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
Peter, did you second?
Second,
I
yes.
have a second by Luttrip. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming?
Yeah, Shannon, roll call, please.
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Luttrip?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, A-3-19 is approved. Thank you. I also want to thank the city departments sitting way in the background that no one can see. They are here at our meeting, as well as
Thank
our
you.
finance manager and the city administration back there as well. And Hillary, can you make a short announcement to our young friend who can step up here for a second, who is, I believe, is leaving us, and you can give us a little background and tell us where he's going? Come on up to the
Yeah,
podium.
that'd be great. Come on up, Jake.
For a second.
You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
And please focus, there you go, there he is. So, Hillary, please give us a little background where this gentleman works for you and where he's going after this, if you don't mind.
Give a little bit, but then I think it'd be great to have Jake kind of tell more of his story. But so if you recall, Jake was on the Planning Commission for 2 terms, I believe, as a student representative. And then he went on and pursued his degrees and did some really cool things overseas and is interested in government and has been interning with us and then was able to get a part-time job with CDA 2030 as our project coordinator for Envision Coeur d'Alene, which is the comprehensive plan update. So, and he has a very exciting job in his future.
Well, I want to thank you for your time here, and hopefully you inspire some other young people to come and help us out in the planning department. And Sean, if you'd like to say something as well, go right ahead.
Or it's really quick, but he is a homegrown native of Coeur d'Alene, and we're very proud of him.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your effort and everything you give to us and best of luck to you in the future.
Great.
I'm sure you'll have a great future.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, I'll call for an...
Before I
Oh,
make the motion for adjournment, I would encourage us to think of what Lynn said earlier today and incorporate that in our discussions on our comprehensive plan, because I think it's a broader issue than just this one. I mean, each one of us are impassioned in certain areas, and I encourage us, when we hit one of those areas, we talk about it and we get into the comp plan, because that's where we can make a bigger impact.
I totally agree. I think that's why every meeting is a learning experience for all of us, and when the comp plan does come to us, we'll incorporate all these things. Again, I'll ask for an adjournment.
So move.
Have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion to adjourn. Good night, everyone.
Thanks.